Oh my gosh, what are we doing? I don't know. Hey everyone, this is Travis with the Whiny Parents, and back with another podcast episode where I am covering season one of Fringe. Episode three is called The Ghost Network. It's another fun episode. I'm going to say again over and over, rinse, repeat. Fringe is fantastic, and just a usual general spoiler warning. If you haven't watched Fringe and you don't want to be spoiled, make sure just to step away. Uh, it's available on the IMDb app. So if you are an Amazon Prime member, that you should have access to that through your device where you stream. Uh, Outside of that, um, if you've already seen it, thanks for checking in and listening to me ramble about one of my favorite shows ever. Um, so, just going to dive into this show. Again, this episode's The Ghost Network. And I think by episode three, you basically get this sense that every episode is going to start with whatever problem the Fringe team of Olivia and Peter and Walter and Broyles and Astrid. Uh, you see what they're going to be facing right off the bat, and I think that's great. I think there are a lot of shows that do that, and I think of shows like I guess Law and Order, SVU, Criminal Intent, shows like that. You kind of have that same structure of a show where okay, let's see what happens in the beginning, and then the investigation leads us to the end. Um, so the beginning is basically it starts with this bus scene that's so fascinating to see, and it's not necessarily the entire sequence. It's basically the end result because you have this essentially, I guess, what you would consider possibly a terrorist attack. Uh, or some type of contagion unleashed. It's hard to describe. I guess terrorist attack would be the best way to discuss it or describe it. And so they have this scene right before they cut to the usual intro, which I never skip. Um, it's one of the most unique things I can think of when I think of seeing like weird catastrophes happen. So kind of summarize this unknown man is on a crowded bus, and as the bus is going through a tunnel, the man opens a briefcase, he puts on a gas mask, which obviously you start seeing startled looks from people on the bus, and he throws a canister on the floor, and smoke starts pouring everywhere, and he walks about halfway down the bus and steals a book bag from a woman who's on bus. So obviously there must have been something important in the bag, and who is this woman, and who's the guy that's done all this with the gas canister. So he exits the bus pretty quickly after the whole thing is filling the bus with smoke, and there's a car nearby waiting for him with a driver, and he gets in and they speed away. Um, So police show up, they get to the bus, and they're like, all right, come on, what's the problem? Let's move the bus. And as the officer gets closer, he realizes that, and this is the unique aspect of this whole sequence of events that's just visually stunning. All of the passengers are trapped within this solid substance. Um, Almost something resembling ice because it looks like you can see like water bubbles or air bubbles that you would normally see with underwater. Um, so it's just this strange visual moment. And the Fringe team shows up to investigate, and the people have to be kind of carved out. And I think Walter describes them as being like trapped in amber. Um, and all the people on the bus are dead. And then we also get this scene where a man goes into a church confessional, and to your not degree, it doesn't seem like he has committed these crimes. He's not the same person as the one who unleashed the canister. Um, so he runs off, and the priest follows him out, but he drops something and he picks up this crumpled piece of paper, and it's an image of these people on a bus screaming. Um, so somehow this man knows what happened to these characters, and you're immediately like, "Whoa, uh, how is this possible?" Um, and so we kind of move forward, and uh, they literally have to carve these people out. And Olivia, I think, is the one who notices that they have footage from the bus, and they notice that the woman's bag isn't along with all of the other effects of every passenger on the bus. Um, so this information that there's this character who kind of had this bus drawn on paper. I think the character's name is Roy. Uh, so the team eventually discovers who he is, and they kind of bring him in to answer some questions, and he basically talks about how he gets these feelings, and essentially these feelings interrupt his way of life where he can't do anything else. He has to get this feeling out. And the only way to get rid of the feeling is to basically draw or kind of construct or build what he's feeling. So that way he can kind of see what that feeling is. He doesn't know why he's drawing it or what it's supposed to mean, but what he ends up drawing or building eventually comes true. Um, so very interesting. Walter calls him a psychic. Um, and basically his theory is he believes that Roy is able to essentially hear someone else's thoughts, but he can't understand what's being said the way his brain is essentially processing in a way where it's connected to his visual centers where he has to like map it out in some way, whether on paper or using building pieces to construct the scene. And uh, so uh, they realize that for the most of part of the past year, he has depicted all of these crimes or disasters. I think for the better part of 9 months, and so they understand he has somehow become in tune with whatever organization or people that are committing these very bad things. And so Walter's like, well, let's just kind of rewire his brain so we can maybe hear what they're saying instead of just waiting for him to draw it out. And he suggests minor brain surgery because obviously. Emphasis on the minor, I think is what what Peter relays back to him. Uh, so the the connection with Walter and the psychic Roy is, and I hope I just watched the episode. I'm already blipping on the character's name, the psychic's name. But there's a pretty explosive response from Peter when he learns that Roy was part of Walter's experiments years before he was locked away in the Mental Institute. Um, and so Peter is clearly angry that his father is or might be the reason why the guy is the way he is. I mean, for most of the past year, this guy's his life is completely, you know, I mean, I'm trying to even imagine where you get this feeling, and the only way to get rid of this gnawing feeling is to like put it out there where you're drawing or building or, um, and so I think Peter feels, hey, you've done something to another human being where it has greatly impacted them in such a negative way. Um, so there's anger, and during this, altercation between Peter and Walter, you know, that's where Walter kind of try taps into his bizarre way of figuring things out, and so we get to this experimenting thing where he's rewiring his brain, which sure, let's make it happen because because there's a uh, sense on Fringe that it's basically do whatever it takes to get the job done. Um, I guess as long as you're not killing the subject. So like a few drill bits into the skull later. God, I'm laughing. I guess. Sure. Um, Walter is asking a series of questions, basically to try to get Roy's brain tuned to the right frequency, and only takes a couple of questions, and all of a sudden he starts speaking Latin. Um, so now this whole like, okay, fortunately Astrid is there and she can understand. She's a linguistics major, um, and so they kind of understand there's going to be some type of exchange happening between the man who orchestrated the gas to solid bus mess and another uh, person. So, it's. I feel like this episode really flies by because you see Olivia and Agent Charlie Francis head to the bus station where they find that there's a secret exchange taking place, and they interrupt it, um, and the way that, spoiler alert, I mean, if you don't want to know, but one of the most alarming things you might see is that when the guy who committed the bus attack gets cornered, cornered being a loose term, like Olivia and Charlie are on opposite ends. He's in the middle on the sidewalk. He puts his gun, he puts the briefcase down, and he puts his arms up and takes a step back off the sidewalk into the street, where he gets slammed immediately by a speeding bus. And holy crap. That scene, it's a moment where you realize whatever organization this guy was working for, or whoever he's dealing with, he dies to either protect whatever he knows or maybe because he's afraid, like he knows the consequences of failing. Who knows? That is the ultimate act. So, this idea of what they call the pattern, where all of these mysterious things have been happening, all of these things with science and technology blending together, so they refer to it as the pattern. So whoever, I guess, is orchestrating the pattern, this act by the steward to get crushed by a bus clearly states that, this is just the beginning, and there's going to be so much more that we see because he dies. Their only lead goes with it, essentially, besides the item that they get in the exchange in the briefcase. But there's going to be more later, and there's that feeling of, yes, let's find out immediately what happens. So I can't imagine having watched this show as it aired, because I would have been like, no, give me more right now. Let's do it. So the fact that I could binge a show um, made it so much easier for me. Uh, and I think a lovely part about this episode, lovely, I mean, maybe poor choice of words, the woman's backpack that was stolen. Nothing was in it, but uh, it was discovered that she had some kind of disc, glass or plastic disc, implanted in her hand. And that was stolen while she was at the morgue. And what is this thing? Like, what is it doing in someone's body? And so then we see Broyles. He takes the chip to Nina Sharp and then turns over the disc, obviously in a separate room after they've left and parted. So we still don't know, okay, what's up with Nina Sharp? Good, bad? It's hard to say. So she hands a disc over to one of her scientists, employees, and in this room where they make the exchange, we see John Scott's body. And he's in some kind of medical containment unit. Is he dead? Is he alive? And so it's incredible to see, because you get to reconnect with the character from the pilot episode, and he was the key character in the first episode's plot. And to also understand, along with this whole pattern mystery, you get to understand that there's more to the John Scott story. Why is, like, he's not, obviously, because he's not decomposing and he's in this containment, and you think, okay, are they trying to heal him? Has he been healed? Is he just unconscious? Is he dead? Um, so it's interesting. And I know that he was described as dead in the pilot episode, but just seeing him again brings these questions of, like, okay, what is going on? Uh, so it's an amazing breadcrumb that keeps you interested, as if you weren't already interested, because Fringe is fascinating, and the interrelational, like the interpersonal relationships you see unfolding on screen, are just so compelling to watch. Uh, so this third episode is such a fun episode. And I probably will say the lack of the excruciating moments that you saw in the second episode might make this episode more fun for me. Um, if you're not sure what I mean, don't worry. You can head back to my coverage of episode 2 over on whinyparent.com. It's under the Laughing as We Go tab for the Whiny Parent podcast. And you can hear all about that excruciating intro scene in my episode 2 coverage. I'm going to leave it right there. That's going to be a wrap on this episode. It's a breeze to watch this show, especially this episode. And I'm making this episode a little briefer, I think, uh, just because our household's in the midst of tackling all these things we all know as social distancing, and I think we're all a little strained. So I just want to say thank you for listening. And if you're looking for another TV show I cover to fill your time these days, I'm also covering the 40th season of Survivor, where I give my favorite highlights, a prediction of future episodes, and I give an update on the draft Megan and I did. Spoiler alert, she's currently kicking my butt. Um, all right, that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to be back soon with the coverage of the fourth episode of Fringe Season 1. Okay, take care, everyone.